Hello and welcome back to the Passion Stories podcast. I'm your host, Emma Cole, and as always, I've got a wonderfully passionate guest coming right up. But as you can tell, I've got another slightly gravelly voice, and that would be because it's still wedding fever. I mean, I'm here for it. I'm loving it. I'm actually off to Toulouse this weekend for a friend's wedding, and I'm so excited. First of all, I love France, which helps. But also, I just think it'll be so jolly, you know? It's kind of like, yeah, you get to go on holiday with your mates and celebrate their love, which we're all here for. And then I've got a couple of days with one of my best mates afterwards, which I'm so excited about. Going to delve into the culture. If anyone's got any Toulouse recommendations, hit them my way. I want to know what is good and whether, you know, maybe there's some great food spots. Anyway, I'm really excited. I don't know why, I feel like I haven't been on holiday in ages. I just love exploring. I think that's, you know, I live in Malta, and one of the things I sat down yesterday and I looked at, where do I want to go that Malta has good access to? There is a ferry to Sicily, and from Sicily you can go up through Italy, or you can take tons of Italian ferries to these little islands that are, you know, nearby. And I was like, God, just that ability to be connected and travel and explore these places is something. Yeah, I've basically written a list of all the things I really want to do within the next year, and I have to admit, the top of my list is actually not a ferry ride away. I'm going to butcher the name, and I apologise in advance. Svalbard, maybe? Anyway, top of Norway, so far north of Norway, and it just looks unreal. I recommend going to have a stalk on Google Maps because it's remote, it looks beautiful. There's these old mining towns, not very many people live there. One of the most interesting things I thought, so the town kind of has a perimeter. It's like, don't go outside the town perimeter because it's likely going to be polar bears. But what is a law there is that you have to carry a gun when you go for a walk out there. So I could just imagine living there would be you'd have a very close connection to wildlife, to the wilderness, and to kind of the raw darkness, because up there I think they get very close to sort of the longest days of darkness, and then that has implications on mental health and on the agriculture and what can grow. I mean, there's so many things. Anyway, I thought it looked so beautiful, and you should go check it out, and maybe I'll see you there. Talking about exploring and going on an adventure brings me to this episode's guest, Duncan Covey. Duncan has just come back from cycling around the world. Epic. So he spent 2 years out there, starting in London in April 2024, and then pootling his way across multiple continents and countries. What's also amazing is that, I don't want to spoil it, but something happens to Duncan on his trip, and he uses this to raise money for Big Moose charity, and he's going to tell us all about it, and it's epic. And I'm going to pop his fundraiser also in the description of the podcast if you fancy donating, if you can. But it's so cool. So Duncan has ridden 36,000 kilometers around the world. The things he must have seen, and he's going to tell us all about it. So let's welcome to the podcast, Duncan Covey. Duncan, thank you so much for coming on the Passion Stories podcast. It is great to have you on. Can you remember the moment you decided to ride around the world?
Thank you. I think it had been a long time coming. It was something that I'd always fancied doing. I wanted to do something big. The first big bike ideas must have been a good 10, 15, 20 years before. But I think it solidified into something a little bit more specific in the maybe 5 or 6 years before I left.
But was there a moment, like, do you remember the moment you told your parents or your friends?
I broke my collarbone in 2023, and I remember sitting, not being able to ride my bike. And I think at that point, it really became clear that now I really miss it. I really miss not riding. So I think at that point, I sort of committed, started making a few plans. I remember phoning my parents up when I was living in London, saying, I've got this idea. I'm going to go and ride my bike around the world, which went better than I expected, to be fair. And from then it was just full steam ahead in making the plans a reality.
So cool. And obviously you had that sort of collarbone moment, but had you seen other people ride around the world? What is it about the long distance cycling that, I guess, kind of tickles your taste buds?
It's a good question. I really enjoy riding my bike, which I think is key. I think it makes it much easier if you're going to do something that big, if you enjoy it. But I've grown up reading and been surrounded by so many travel books, particularly of people riding bikes. My family all ride bikes. We've done a few trips together as I was growing up. So I think it was always, if I was going to do something big, it was always going to be a bike ride. I then took the attitude that I'd been to university and I was working, and I thought perhaps I only get one chance to do something big. So if I get one chance to do something big, I need to go as big as possible. And I couldn't really think of anything bigger than riding around the world. It had a nice, clean story to it. And so once you get an idea like that in your head, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. So I knew I needed to make it happen.
And so you set off from London, and then where did you kind of go? What was your route?
Yeah, so I set off in April 2024 from London. I rode down to the south coast and got a ferry into France, into northern France. I rode down through France, into Switzerland, across northern Italy, into Austria, then Slovenia, down through the Balkans to Greece, across Greece and into Turkey. When I got to Turkey, most people that would ride around the world would go across the top. It's the short route across what's a pretty large country, but I wanted to see a bit more, so I went down the coast to the southwest and then straight across the middle, which was fascinating, into Georgia, then hopped over the Caspian Sea and went through Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and into the mountains in Kyrgyzstan. I then flew south from there into New Delhi and rode through India and Nepal, hopped a little bit further, and then went down through Southeast Asia from Hanoi in northern Vietnam down to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Then got another flight down to Australia, went across Australia from Perth over to the east coast and then up the coast of Brisbane, then rode through New Zealand, hopped over to America, and then from Los Angeles on the west coast through into South Carolina on the east, and then one last flight back over to Portugal so I could ride through Portugal, Spain and France, back up to where I started, ferry across, and then a final day back into London.
My word, that is, I mean, I'm just thinking, like, in my head, I've got this globe kind of going around and imagining that is a really, that's a really big trip. So what was it, 36,000 kilometres roughly? About
that, yeah. Yeah. It's weird. It feels strange to sum it up to put it into one sentence.
Yeah.
It was a really long way, but it was an incredible, incredible ride.
And when you look back now, are there sort of, was it everything that you imagined at that moment when you'd sat there with a broken collarbone?
It's really strange. I don't know what I was expecting necessarily, but I just knew, the big thing was that I knew that if I didn't do it, the regret was going to be massive. And so I think, bizarrely, the itch to scratch was to make sure that wasn't going to be the case, which I feel like I've done. The challenge now is that if I didn't have the bug before, I definitely do now. But it's, I wanted an adventure, and I certainly got one.
And I remember seeing when your family came out, you said you're a family of cyclists. What was it like having your parents kind of cycle alongside you?
Yeah, it was really nice. I've had a few visits along the way. They came out when I was in Georgia, just before I headed off into the stands for a quick visit, which was really nice. My dad then rode with me in Kyrgyzstan, the end of Uzbekistan into Kyrgyzstan, which was fantastic. It was a section that we both really wanted to ride up on the old Silk Roads, so it was the perfect opportunity. But as great as that was, it didn't feel right to have dad riding with me and not have mum ride at least a little bit of the trip. When I was in Spain coming back through at the end, they were riding their own trip over there. They were riding through Spain, and it lined up perfectly that we basically crossed paths in northeastern Spain. So we spent a few days together there, which was really, really special.
Oh, that is so wholesome. And I mean, you went through so many countries, and I mean, was there one that was a real highlight?
I really enjoyed Kyrgyzstan. I think most people that go there say the same thing. The thing that got me was the scale. It was just absolutely massive. The landscapes are so big. For such a small country, the mountains are huge, the valleys are vast. It's so untouched. There's such little infrastructure. It's lots of off-road riding. It's hard, but it's so rewarding. I really loved it there. I got a bit sick while I was there too, so didn't quite manage to get all of the riding, the full route that I wanted to do, done out there. So I think I'm going to have to head back and do a bit more there at some point soon. It's just so incredibly beautiful.
Did you drink a lot of camel milk?
I was given some in Western Kazakhstan, and I think it was the most disgusting thing. that I had in the whole trip. I really like milk. I drink quite a lot of milk if I'm training, and somebody in the desert pulled up and jumped out of his car and gave me a couple of plastic bottles and a carrier bag. And it had camel's milk in one, which fortunately he'd gone by the time I tried it, because I got it into my mouth. It was warm and lumpy and it tasted like the smell of goats. It was revolting. But threw that back out. The water, it was horrible. It was slightly brown and it tasted like a sort of musty hotel room smell. So I didn't drink that either. But then, to his credit, I opened the other bag thinking it was going to be something horrific, and it was half a watermelon with a spoon stuck in the top. And it was, maybe I was just reeling from the camel's milk, but I think it was the best thing I've ever tasted in my life. It was amazing.
Oh, that sounds, and I mean, was that kind of a resounding theme throughout your trip, the hospitality of others?
Yeah, it blew my mind that the further you get from home in the UK, the friendlier everyone seemed to get. People in countries where they have the least seem to be the most generous and supportive. You'd have people driving past and stopping and getting out a stove and making tea, people passing drinks or snacks or fruit out of car windows. Many times I'd stop in a cafe and the local police might be in there, and you'd go to pay for your drink and your toast or whatever you might have found, and find that they'd have paid for you and left. People you hadn't even spoken to. The welcome that I got across the world was just incredible. It was a really nice reminder, because I was so sure that I was going to find that, and I'd read about it in so many books, but it was so much better than I could have imagined, which is a really good feeling.
I mean, that is so wholesome. Can you imagine something like that happening in the UK?
It's a really interesting one now, where I like to think that I was friendly and welcoming before, but I wander around looking for people on bikes, wanting to be able to go and give them some biscuits, or see if someone needs a place to camp, or to try to give it back, because it just doesn't seem to be a thing that really happens here. Our culture perhaps is just slightly different, and it's not a normal, natural thing to do. Can you imagine seeing a stranger in town and inviting them in to sleep in your home? It just wouldn't happen here, but it was commonplace around the world. I think we've got a lot to learn from that. It'd be really nice if we could make that into something that happens here too.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned there that you were a bit unwell in Kyrgyzstan, because I also saw when you had pneumonia at one point during the trip. I mean, what happened? What was that like?
Yeah, it happened a couple of times. So it happened there in Kyrgyzstan and then again in America. I got a bit sick because I met some guys in Uzbekistan that weren't particularly friendly. I stopped to drink some tea. They sort of blocked me into a corner in a roadhouse place, and they had moonshine and they wanted me to drink it. I didn't really want to, because I'd ridden quite a long way already. And I'm only small. I had lots of riding to do and I was in the desert. If I had any of that, I'd have been on my back. But they got quite annoyed that I wasn't having it and was sort of forcing it bottle into my mouth. And yeah, it was pretty horrible. So I got away, which was good. But I got quite sick after that. I spoke to some doctors eventually that thought it was from methanol, because moonshine's often made with things it shouldn't be. But after that, my stomach got worse and worse and worse. And if I ate anything, it was falling out the other side. It was really unpleasant. It lasted for about 4 weeks, where I basically didn't manage to eat anything properly. That was through the south of Uzbekistan and then up into the mountains in Kyrgyzstan. It just got worse and worse. And eventually I just couldn't put any power out. I couldn't really eat anything. It was really uncomfortable. It really hurt. And the concern we had was that maybe I had a worm or something from some bad meats, because some of the meat you eat out there is questionable. But it turned out when I went into this hospital in a small town in the mountains in Kyrgyzstan that was pneumonia. So I spent 4 or 5 days on a drip, which I did get better, which was great. But it certainly had an impact. It left me feeling pretty unfit. And the challenge there after that was, after so many antibiotics, going to India. That's the one place where I wanted my insides to be full of anything that could protect me. And yeah, so it wasn't ideal, but also things happen on an adventure, and what are you going to do?
I mean, yeah, 5 days on a trip in Kyrgyzstan. Were there moments that you were like, is this, did you ever doubt that what you were doing was a good idea?
I think at that point, it didn't feel too bad because at that point, it was fairly clear there was a problem, but I also had a solution for it. And so as unpleasant as it was and disappointing because it wasn't what I wanted to be doing, it was what I had to do at the time. The bigger drive at that point was Kyrgyzstan was probably the country I was most excited for. And it did live up to it. But as time would have it, I was there during my birthday, and I was in the hospital just before my birthday. And I was just so desperate to get back out and get onto the roads. If you're on an adventure of a lifetime riding a bike around the world, to spend your birthday in hospital is so lame. I did not. That's not what I was there for. So the real driver was to get better so we could get back out onto the roads. And fortunately, they let me out the day before. So part of the challenge with something like pneumonia is that it's really high altitude. And so it makes it harder to breathe anyway. This small town we were in was in a kind of a bowl up in the mountains. So it would be ideal if we could get out and drop down to some lower valley to then recover a bit faster. But to be able to do that, you had to climb over the lip and then drop down again, which is up to 3,000 meters again. Crikey. So it was a birthday to remember because it was a fairly brutal ride with, lungs that still didn't really work and a very tired body. But we made it up over the top and down the other side and got into a bed for the night.
And was that the toughest moment or were there other ones?
I don't think so. Earlier at the start of the trip, somebody tried to steal my bike in Italy when I was on it, stopped me on a road and stopped for a chat like people always do. But he decided he wanted the bike and jumped on me and tried to pull me off, which was quite unpleasant. It shook me up quite a lot. And then probably it must have been about a month later, I got down into Albania. I was just about to leave the country and there was a guy. I mean, he was posing as a shepherd, but he had donkeys and horses with cardboard boxes and white packages strapped all over them. He wasn't shepherding sheep. That saw me coming through and told me to stop. I didn't really want to. I was trying to avoid stopping if I didn't feel particularly safe. But he jumped out into the track with a shotgun and pointed at me and told me I had to pay or I wasn't going to go any further, which was that was probably the most challenging part. I got through, I got away, but I broke some gear descending off the mountains away from him. I rode quite fast, quite hard to just try and put a bit of space in and broke some of my kit. So I had to wait for some spares to be sent out from sponsors, which was absolutely fine. But then when I stopped, I'd spent the last sort of month after those two things happening telling myself, isn't it exciting when stuff goes wrong on an adventure? This is just how it goes. And maybe that's the case, but I also was just in a bit too deep and I just couldn't quite take it. I got to the point where once I stopped and I didn't have that excitement and the distraction of riding, that it caught up with me. And at that point, I sort of realized that I probably needed some help. I wasn't really sleeping. I was waking up all the time and I was struggling to ride during the daytimes as well, even just going out for day rides while I was waiting. I think that was probably the closest the trip got to where I couldn't quite see where I was supposed to be going, that I didn't quite know how to continue, but I got some help and then it was fine. So yeah, a few challenges, but what would an adventure be without a few challenges, as long as you can work out how to get through them, then.
Agreed. I mean, but you also raised money for Big Moose, an amazing mental health charity, kind of off the back of that experience. And I saw that you're on nearly £20,000, which is insane. When you look back at obviously a really tough, challenging thing to go through, how do you think about it now?
It's a funny one because I never intended to turn a ride like this into a fundraising mission. I considered it at the start and I thought it might help the sort of message of what I was doing and why I was doing it. But it seemed a bit disingenuous because ultimately I just wanted to go on a big adventure. It was as selfish as that. I just wanted to go and ride my bike and have a big adventure. And to claim that I was doing it to raise money for charity would have been a lie because I was just doing it because I wanted to, which I think is fine. But then once I'd had some support, that made such a big difference. It's not an exaggeration to say that I wouldn't have made it as far as I did without it. with a large platform online of people who had arrived and started following, at that point, I wanted to give something back to the charity that had helped. And it made it much easier to fundraise because I'd shared the story the whole way. And so to be able to then launch a fundraiser and tell people what had happened, remind people how it had been, and the fact that I was still there to share it like I was, it made perfect sense. And I think that's why people bought into the fundraiser quite well. I don't think I would have been able to raise money in the same way if it had been for a charity that I didn't feel so strongly about or have such a strong connection to. It feels really good. When I got back, I'm proud to have ridden around the world, but I think I feel more proud for the money raised and to have been able to raise the profile of a charity, because as useful as money is for a charity, there's the other side as well, that if you can repeatedly remind people that a charity like that is there, at some point someone's going to need it. I wasn't aware that they existed until a friend signposted it to me. And so to be able to make sure that people know they exist so that if people need them, they can access the support. I think that's something that I feel really proud of as well, because I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and that's an incredible impact. It's not just your inspirational ride around the world. It's so much more of that, as you say. And just thinking about the money aspect of things, because I feel like people always wonder how much does it cost to ride around the world?
It's a great question, and it's one that before I left, I didn't really have any idea. Obviously, it depends how you do it. I wild camped as much as possible. I cooked lots of instant noodles and porridge. I ate lots of bread. I ate as much fruit that I could find on the roadsides as possible. So I did it as cheaply as I could. For me, I spent about £15,000 over 16 months. Most of that, there was a chunk in Europe at the start. It was then pretty cheap through Turkey and the Stans, India and Nepal, down through Asia. And then as I got into Australia, New Zealand and the US, the prices skyrocketed. Most of the money was either flights or in New Zealand, Australia, New Zealand and the US. You could do it a bit cheaper. I ended up spending more money than a bigger proportion of the money than I might have expected on accommodation so that I could charge stuff up. Filming on a phone and editing videos on a phone and putting them on the internet uses so much battery. And my reasons for staying indoors when I did was dictated by when all my power banks were flat. So I'd charge them all up and I'd make them last as long as possible. And when they were all flat, I'd then book in to stay indoors somewhere in a hostel or a hotel or a homestay, wherever I was, which was fine in countries where that was really cheap. It was fantastic when it was really cheap because it didn't feel like the wrong thing to do. But, in the US sometimes, or in New Zealand, it was pretty punchy. But it's what you've got to do. You could ride around the world for less if you're willing to approach it in a different way. But yeah, about 15,000 for me. And look, that was basically me eating my life savings, eating every penny that I'd saved before I left, and I wouldn't change a thing.
I love it. And you mentioned there that you were editing videos kind of along the way and filming, because you rode around the world. You also documented it on social media and the videos were awesome. Did that add an extra level of pressure to things, or kind of you finished the day riding and were like, oh God, I've got to upload a video to social media?
It was a funny one because I thought I'd record it and share it when I left. It seemed like a good way of reminding my friends and my family that I was still alive. It seemed like the easiest way to do it all in one place rather than having to send lots of messages. When I left, I had a couple of thousand followers, and the intention was never to grow a large audience online. I've never really had an aspiration to have a following on social media. It was never really the point of the ride. The ride was for me. I wanted to just go and ride my bike. As the audience grew, perhaps a sense of pressure grew too, because people were expecting a video. But I wasn't naive to the fact that if I did share a video for people every day, and if that audience did continue to grow, it could open doors for me when I finished. There were certainly days when you'd get to the end, you'd ride for 8 or 10 hours into a rainy headwind all day, and then you find somewhere to put your tent and you sit in wet kiss and you're in the tent and eat another bowl of instant noodles. and all you want to do is go to sleep. And at that point, you then have to start going through the footage you filmed during the day and editing a video. There were certainly days where it didn't feel particularly appealing, but I can only be grateful for what it's offered me in return. It was never the intention, but it's a skill I've learned as well. I hadn't edited any videos before I left either. It was all quite new to me. So yeah, it was a steep learning curve, but I'm glad it was a part of the trip.
And you said earlier that having done this trip, it's kind of, you've caught the bug. Is there something on your mind that you're kind of lining up for the near future?
There certainly is. I think the key learning from this to begin with was that on a route like I did, you experience all sorts of riding. There were some that I would say is sort of travel through Southeast Asia, for example, where culture is a huge part of the experience. And there are other places where it's very much adventure. Places like the mountains in Kyrgyzstan or the deserts in Uzbekistan or the Nullarbor in Australia. And although I enjoyed both, I realized it became very clear that I found the adventure the most fulfilling of all, which is great. That means I know what to chase next. So the next sets of riding, I think some of the next projects will be looking for that kind of adventure. It's a tricky one to work out what trip should come next, because I don't think you can really take the approach of working out what will better the last trip. Mm. It would be an easy one to take if you ride, lands into John O'Groats, and then you could ride across Europe, and then you could ride around the world, and it would seem a natural progression to get bigger and bigger. But for me, I think it's not that there isn't anything bigger, because I could do something faster, or I could do something more adventurous. It's not that I want to better what I've done before. I just want to chase what inspires me at the time. Australia at the moment, the middle of Australia, I've been reading some books about explorers in the 1800s. Hopefully I'll have slightly more success than them, because lots of them haven't been found yet. But it seems like the kind of place where if you want to have a big adventure, you should go and ride a bike. To me, nothing screams adventure more than having to do it on a fat bike, because a normal bike isn't appropriate. So trying to line up getting a fat bike put together so I can head out into the hot, sandy interior of Australia to go and chase some more adventure. We'll see. Lots of bike riding to be done.
That sounds epic. And I thought we could do a little bit of a cheeky quick fire. This is my favourite part.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so I think I know the answer to this already, but favourite country you rode through?
Kyrgyzstan.
Best food you ate?
Curry in India. So many good curries.
Country you never want to go back to?
Oh, that's really hard. There isn't a country I don't want to go back to, but
won't be back in a hurry. We can rephrase it.
Yeah, I got heat stroke in Montenegro that was really unpleasant. So I would say Montenegro, but it was beautiful. Go and ride a bike there. It's a fantastic country to ride a bike in, but maybe there.
Country you want to visit the most that you haven't yet?
I wanted to go to Mongolia. I really want to ride a bike in Mongolia, but I couldn't make it work because I didn't have a visa for China. But Mongolia, it's on the list sometime soon.
It's on the list. If you didn't ride your bike, what would you be doing?
I'd probably just be miserable and unfulfilled. Yeah, I'd probably be at a desk. Can you imagine? No, I don't want to think about it. Sorry, I'm not answering that.
So good. Your biggest takeaway from your entire adventure?
That the world is full of kind, supportive, generous people. You just have to find a dream, chase it, and trust that people will be there to help.
Love it. Duncan, thank you so much for coming on the Passion Stories podcast. You've been a really inspiring guest.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Oh my days, what do we reckon? Would you cycle around the world? 2 years is a long time. But he has seen so many awesome things. I mean, Kyrgyzstan. Oh, what a wonderful place. And I love the fact that, his family came along for certain segments. He had a couple of friends at certain segments, which must have been really sort of uplifting. I also thought, he really underpins how the people he met were so incredible and so hospitable. And I think right at the beginning of the episode, we sort of discussed, would that happen in the UK? And also now I've got this vision of him going around Cornwall looking for people on bikes that he can help out. And I just think that is so wholesome. And yeah, just utterly, I'm so inspired. And, you know, it is something I've thought about, cycling around the world. And I think I'd like to do it in the same way that Duncan's done, in kind of you're not on a massive rush, you're making the most of it. You know, I do need to save 15 grand though, but it's good to have that as a budget, isn't it? It's good to know that that is what you can expect. And I rate the fact that he told us that. I think that's because so often it just sort of seems this elusive, where do you even begin? And I just think, yeah, the things you'd see at the route, what route would you take? I mean, so many things to think about, so much inspiration. And go and follow Duncan on Insta. So he's Duncan Covey UK, and see his next adventure. I do think this Australia adventure sounds fascinating. And as he mentioned, they're a Big Moose charity. Please reach out to them if you need their help. They're an amazing charity, and Duncan's fundraiser is still open, and it's in the description. So if you can, please do support that. Oh, and if you enjoyed this podcast, which I did, definitely, how inspiring, what a guy. I'd really also recommend listening to the episode with Mark Beaumont, who happens to be the fastest man to cycle around the world. And we've got a ton of other adventurers. There's Alistair Humphreys, there's Zara Lackland, who youngest person and fastest woman ever to row across the Atlantic from Europe to South America. It's pretty epic. And there's also Ollie France. I mean, there's so many. How lucky are we to get to hear from these wonderfully inspiring people? So yeah, mega thank you, Duncan. And as always, make sure you follow, share, like, subscribe, tell your friends all about the Passion Stories podcast, and keep your ears out for another episode coming to your ears in a fortnight. Thanks to Tune Tank for the tunes.